So you all have had some questions on the channel, so I figured why not come out and about in this wonderful hell hot heat and get you guys some of your questions answered, but a little bit more vlog style, just getting out and about, utilizing that good weather, close those rings and those steps. So let's get to your questions. First question coming in saying your breakdowns are so great thinking about the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II versus the iPhone 15 or 16 Pro for talking head, language education style content, medium to long form, in a home studio with good lights and audio. Any advice? Why, yes, I do have some advice. Here's the thing. Most of the time, you can get away with what you're already using, which is your phone. You do not need to have a dedicated camera. It is not required. And the thing is this, phones have been vetted for a really long time. It is not that big of a deal if you want to use one. What is a big of a deal is more of whether or not you feel like this is going to be frustrating for you to use your phone. You do need the accessories. You do need to make sure you have good lighting, which you said you already have all the accessories and hashtag all the things, and that's great. But one of the things is making sure, if nothing else, you know you and know what's going to frustrate you more, a camera or your phone. I don't think there's anything wrong with using your phone. I just know, for me, for example, I started with my phone. After doing some videos with it, it frustrated the hell out of me, and I'm like, I'm good with this. Let me use a dedicated camera, and that's been the right decision and choice for me. Sometimes you won't know until you do it. Go make 20, 30 videos with your phone, and maybe you'll know by video 7 how frustrating it is for you or how liberating it is for you. Give it a shot, and then if you don't like it, then you know maybe the camera route is more for you. Or sometimes people try it and it's like, you know what, my phone isn't as bad as I thought. Give it a shot, see what you think, and you figure out for your use case whether or not you think this is a good situation for you or if it's more annoying. You don't know what you think you know about creating until you actually do it. And what I mean by that is you got to do stuff. Content creation is for doers. It's not for contemplating. It's not for thinking. It's not for anything other than doing. You have to do. So I love my phrase learn and do, because it is a cycle. You learn, you do. You do, you learn. And then the cycle just continues, and it's a beautiful process. Next question. Can I use the 1 terabyte SanDisk Extreme? This is coming from my Sony ZV-E10 Mark I video where I'm talking about the best SD cards. You should not be using, under any circumstances, 1,000 gigabytes, which is 1 terabyte for the ZV-E10 Mark I. Even if I use that for my ZV-E1, it would be overkill. If you look at something like a 256 gigabyte card, you can record 5 and 10 hours, depending on if you're doing 4K or 1080p. The incredible frustration that you have not likely experienced as to why this seems like it's a good idea is losing data, a card becoming corrupt, or a card cracking. And I've talked about this in a YouTube short, as well as when we do our Friday live helpcast, I talk about this as well. This is not as good as it seems. Imagine having 20, 30 hours worth of footage from an all-day thing, even if it was your main camera that's the backup camera, to just overall catch footage. What you want to do instead is actually have a bunch of 256 and 512 gigabyte SD cards at the most, because when you are going through your content, you want to be able to swap SD cards during breaks, as well as the card gets close to full. Just look at it at the beginning of your recording session and you can see like, oh, I have 4 or 5 hours, or I have 10 hours worth of recording. Stop at 5 hours, because sometimes, anytime, honestly, at no time do you want that much footage having a potential to be lost, corrupted, missing, or anything. Swap cards and then dump it, because you're also looking at that footage goes corrupt. It's corrupt, it's missing, it's gone. You just don't want to deal with that. I promise you, you don't. Next question. I saw 33 minutes from our Friday live helpcast that I was comparing the FX30 to full frame. What about the A6700? Would the A6700 shoot the same video if they both have the same sensor and cinema tone? Also, can you get cinema out of the ZV-E10? I'm not sure if that's referring to like the Mark I or the Mark II. So let's talk sensor sizes for a second. Well, just sensor capabilities. When you're looking at one camera versus another, and you see that they do have the same sensor, the only difference is going to be the shell of that camera body. meaning the only difference is whether or not you want something that is more cinema based. Literally the FX series, any of those cameras are going to be cinema based, meaning it's going to be something, instead of like the aperture, the shutter speed, and the ISO, you're going to see language like iris, t-stops, things like that, that actually is more specific to cinema. And when you look at some of the A6700 footage, you'll see, even just from the screen of the camera, it looks more like the ZV camera from those icons that swipe in from the side of the screen. Well, that kind of stuff is more creator friendly, as well as you being able to use it or not use it if you want to. So it is more centric to hybrid creators and content creators. So it really depends on the lane that you're focused in, but you're going to get the exact same sensor performance and capabilities. So your creativity isn't capped based on the technology in the camera. You're getting the exact same. Now, whether or not you can get the same kind of footage in the ZV-E10, I always love to show a little bit of Becky and Chris when they went on their voyage, if you will, and it was absolutely fantastic. And just look at the footage. This was shot on the A6400, but you'll get the exact same performance. So when you look at footage like that from Becky and Chris, the only thing that shows me is that there's a difference in skill. Can your skill carry whatever the limitations are of the cameras? And creators that want to see what a camera can do, really think about, what could I do instead? Yes, it's great to see what Becky and Chris was able to do, but at the same time, just look and see what can I actually do when I get that camera, and then make your decision based off of that. Man, it's a beautiful shot. Hi Diane, if I were to get this camera for hair tutorials for myself and in my salon suite, which lens would you recommend? I was looking at the 11mm f1.8. Now, this is going off of the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II. When we're looking at this kind of camera, still think of as if it's the A6700, because more or less you're going to get similar type of performance. Whether or not you can use it for vlogging, yes. Now, with lens, that's when it starts to get tricky. 11mm f1.8 lens, it's a great lens. I've tried it, I've used it, but it doesn't have stabilization. The active stabilization is improved, but the difference with the ZV-E10 Mark II versus the A6700, even the ZV-E1, is we still have IBIS in the camera, and we don't in the ZV-E10 Mark II. Is it great? It's better. That's the one thing I can say, it's better. Not having that OSS, or that optical stabilization, it's really tricky. It's wide enough, yes, but is it ideal? Probably no. And then too, the other thing with vlogging, sometimes you don't know what you don't know until you get in that situation. It is so nice to show how much and how big of an area it is, like how much is around you. When I was in New York, I not only wanted to show how much was around me and how big these buildings were, but I wish I could have zoomed in even more. And that's not always a regular thing. So just think about, what kind of scenarios are you in, we're going to be vlogging in. So if you're in a hair salon, you don't always want to show how wide or how big of a space is. You probably want to get in close. So while you can use clear image zoom to cut in, and I put in my blog post where there's a clear image zoom calculator, you just put in the focal length of the lens that you have, and then from there it'll tell you what available focal lengths that you have. So I'll put a link to that down in the description. But the thing is this, really consider whether or not that's what you want. I don't think in a hair salon situation that would be it. I would more so still go with the wide zoom. Try something like the Sigma 10 to 18 f2.8 lens. f2.8 is going to be a chef's kiss when you're indoor, even with good lighting and indoor situations. But like when you go into that odd conference room, or you go into a darker area, versus being able to have to ramp up the ISO all the time. But consider a zoom, something like the 10 to 18 by Sigma, that f2.8 lens, chef's kiss. And then if you do want that OSS, I would probably backtrack and get that 10 to 18 by Sony, the f4. Not as great, but again, you're getting a much better sensor. Sony cameras aren't struggling for low light, so you can still work with it. It'll be a fantastic experience, so give it a shot. It's so hot outside. It's 100 degrees right now. I am shedding calories like nobody's business. The cicadas are about to come out, so we got to wrap up this video. Next question. Now I'm considering Lumix over Sony. I'm not into cameras and specs. I just want to record stuff and look somewhat professional. Thanks for the tip. Ease of use is important. This is also coming off of that Sony ZV-E10 Mark II video. And here's the thing. I love Sony. Sony is the right brand for me. Doesn't mean that it may be for you, but let me add a little caveat. when you're looking at something and you're almost sold on it, or it's like that's checking all the boxes of what I need to actually create, you need to hold firm and hold fast to the decisions of why it's right for you, not why it's right for me or anybody else. The other thing too, don't get lost in the sauce between brands and I switched to this company versus that one. Even if I switched to Olympus or OM Digital right now, which I don't think anybody's doing, but if that was the case and I said this checks all the boxes for me, for my goals, what I want to do, me moving forward, and the visions that I have, this camera helps me to achieve those dreams, that doesn't mean that you should switch. That doesn't mean that you should. So don't get so caught up in what your favorite creator is using. I get it. It is endearing to make sure that you can actually get help, have somebody that knows what they're doing, or even see what kind of content they're able to make and know this, like they can teach me or show me how to replicate that, or at least I know that that's possible on that camera. The biggest thing, I think, more than anything, fall in love with creating content. Don't fall in love so much so with a brand of camera, but fall in love with creating content. I love personally certain cameras because it helps me create my vision and bring my vision to life. If you listen to my podcast, the Video Simplified podcast, you've heard me say video helps bring your vision to life. The camera is the tool to help you to do that. I also don't subscribe to the whole thing of gear doesn't matter, because the right gear gets out of the way and makes content creation and fulfilling your vision easier. The wrong gear gets in the way and it now becomes where it matters because it's frustrating to use. I don't want that for anybody. So what I encourage you to do is find out, what are your requirements? What do you actually need? What are your content goals and what you're trying to do? And then make the decision on the camera based off of the camera that actually checks those boxes. So over the next 2, 3, 4, and 5 years, you don't have to switch cameras unless you want to, but not because you have to. I cannot express this enough, that creators have to stop switching cameras simply because a new camera came out, versus analyzing and critiquing, does this camera help me to achieve my vision and my goals more and make it easier, and it would help my gear get out the way even more for me? Or am I doing this just because everybody else is doing it? And it's some kind of high school social pressure, it feels like, on YouTube, around in the camera space, around having the right gear and having gear that matches what everybody else is using. And if you're not using that, then you feel like you're not in part of the in crowd. Ignore all of that stuff. Ignore comments and stuff you see on the forums, because that is a cesspool and it's a lot of vitriol, unfortunately, in the camera space. But I can at least vouch for my channel. It is extremely and highly important to fall in love with the act of creating, fall in love with being a creator, fall in love with ideating and coming up with the content that actually fuels you and is actually going to help bring your vision, whatever that is, to life. Or even if you're doing it for a hobby, that you can do it. The camera is just simply the tool, no different than a phone, and it's not going to change things. I almost got attacked by a bumblebee. The cicada's coming out. It's time for me to go. So if you guys have more questions, make sure you post those down below. We may be doing some more Q&A episodes. Just depends on how many comments and stuff that we get. But again, I cannot emphasize and stress this enough. 99.9% of you, if you already have a camera, you don't need to upgrade. You don't need to switch. You simply need to go create. Create, post, repeat, and I will see y'all in the next video.